Cloud. Okie dokes. So welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today for the office hours for the Urban Agriculture Grant Program. My name is Sarah Bernal. I'm the Urban Agriculture Program Lead here at the California Department of Food and Ag running this program. And I just wanted to set up the stage for how it will be easiest for us to work together today. I think only because I don't have any support staff right now helping me navigate the chat or letting people into the room. I'm kind of here flying solo right now. It would be really great if we could actually just use the raise hand feature. As you see, Susan here has her little raised hand emoji thingy up on the corner. If we could use that as a way for me to be able to call people in order, that would probably be the easiest way to make sure that everybody's questions get answered in order, and then and avoid sort of using the chat just because I'm going to be speaking and trying to answer people's questions, and I don't want to miss something that I might not see in the chat. So before I keep going, I just want to double check now that we seem to have a pretty full room. If anybody is really wanting me to go over the whole grant framework for 15 minutes, I know that there's already raised hands up for questions. So if anybody would like that, if they could vocalize that, if they could just take themselves off mute and let me know that that's something that they would want. If not, the slide deck presentation that I have is recorded and it's on the website, so you can watch that anytime. So I'll give that just about a couple of seconds for people to speak up if anyone is really thirsty for that presentation. Okay, great. So I'm not hearing anybody needing the slide deck. So I think that the best way is for me to just go ahead and I'll start calling on people in order. When you've finished the questions that you have, if you could put the hand, the raise hand function off so that I know that you're no longer waiting to speak, that's super helpful. And then if there's something that I can't answer today, what I've been doing is asking for people to then type that question into the chat so I can save it and get advice from other offices so I can get you that answer later on. Okay, well, beautiful. I guess we will just go ahead and dive right in. So Susan, why don't you take yourself off mute? Thanks. Welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. I'm most concerned about the land. I don't have, I'm purchasing land with this grant and I don't have any anything in mind yet. I've been looking around, but even what I'm looking for is probably not going to be available in 6 or 8 months when the funding's available. So I'm looking forward to your comments on that. But what I've resorted to is like I'm drawing in a CAD program my dream situation, how it will look if once I get the land. So that's my first question.
Yeah, okay, so thanks Susan, that's a great question. Right now, so the 2023 Urban Ag Grant Program does allow for you to use up to 75% of your budget ask can be spent on either land purchase or the cost of your lease. So whatever your lease cost is, up to 75% of your total budget can be directed towards that. So the remaining 25% would need to go, for other functions of your grant proposal. I'm actually so I'm just going to be completely transparent here. I've only been with the state to create this program. Prior to that, I was an urban farmer, just like a lot of people on this call. So I'm learning as I go. I realized that the state did not have, I actually didn't know this until like 2 weeks ago, that we don't have existing detailed guidelines for land purchase because it's not something that grants have allowed very much in the past. So I'm meeting with the legal department on Monday to try to begin a conversation around all of the different types of guidance that I can provide to the public from a legal standpoint. What I do know right now, Susan, which is very true, is the fact that you're writing this proposal, it's what, October. The likelihood of anyone having cash in hand before May is 0. So how does that work, right? In terms of land leasing, it's a lot easier. You might have a lease already in hand, and then you would just pretty much submit your lease and you could be reimbursed for the cost, or you could submit an advance payment request for the cost of that lease. For land purchasing, there is no straightforward guidance that I unfortunately even have from the legal team right now, other than the fact that they understand that this process doesn't align with the, what do we call, the intense pressures of being in California and acquiring land. I think that one thing that I am understanding right now is that in order to move forward with a land purchase, the administrative department is going to ask that, or is going to require that there's already a formal process happening. So whether that's you're working with a, they're not going to write you a check for anything until you've entered into the beginning of an agreement with a third party lender or whatever it is that you're doing to get that land. So this grant, you have until September of 2026 to spend it down. So there's that amount of time period where you could say, I want to spend 75% of my grant application for land purchasing, knowing that you're probably going to need other funding sources because land is so expensive everywhere. And for the first 8 months, you're just going to be doing recon on that. But you already have line itemed 75% of your total budget for that. So you are going to be moving through this whole process as a tentative thing. And that's unfortunately, that's just the reality of the time that it takes to process all of these applications, build contracts, and then actually secure funding. I agree that I don't know how anyone could enter into a land agreement now and then have that still be there for you in 8 months,
Yeah.
So there, unfortunately, Susan, there's no super duper easy answer other than you don't have to have a contract in place during the application. So is that sufficient enough for you to at least be able to put your application together?
Yeah, it sounds like I can submit it, put it, get it in, and then once I'm approved for funding, then I can start looking for land.
Yeah, once you are notified that you're going to receive an award, then you'll enter into the contracts period, which takes a few weeks. And then once the funding checks start being cut, then you can really start saying, okay, I'm going to submit an invoice for the deposit or down payment or whatever it is that you decide is needed to get your project running. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. Okay. Next up, Farmer Rishi.
Yeah, just a question about the application itself again. I'm looking at the question about the data or information you will gather, the metrics. And so, our project has kind of 3 projects within it. And so I'm wondering, I feel like if I just do 1 metric per project, that's doesn't feel sufficient to describe, like, we ourselves want to collect more than 1 metric per project. So do you think it would be okay for us to do, let's say 2 metrics per of the 3 projects? So there'll be 6 metrics that we include.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great place to be. I think that doing 6 metrics or 2 per project, especially given the complexity of what it sounds like you want to apply for, would be sufficient. Also, just keep in mind that during the application period, there's this much detail, but during the contracts phase, there will be, once essentially your application is selected for an award, you'll enter the contracts phase, and in that phase, we'll work together to detail out your scope of work, which is a separate thing than your application. I mean, most of the information is in your application,
Right.
but we can really nail down details in terms of the metrics and what you want to do also during the contracts phase period. But in terms of having a strong application and making sure that you're sort of proving that you're going to have an impact in some way and that you're going to use certain metrics to represent that impact. Yeah, the way that you described it, I think would be fine. I think 6 metrics for the variety of projects that are all coming from one organization is ample.
Okay, great. That was my main question. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, next up, I see Ashley.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Ashley with the Edible Schoolyard Project. We have two program sites, one in Berkeley, California, and one in Stockton. Ideally, would like to support the work at both program sites, but under the criteria, question 1B for track 2, it looks like the census tracts must be indicated as priority populations. I know that is true for the census tracts where we operate in Stockton, but not for the location of our Berkeley program. Are we understanding it correctly that we could write for the Stockton, but not for our Berkeley and not support both sites?
So in terms of the priority populations, the language is really that you either have to, that the project either needs to be led by or serve folks from a priority population. So I don't know if in your Berkeley project, like the farm itself maybe is not located. For example, this would be an eligible expense. The farm site perhaps is not located within a priority population piece of the map, but there are community members coming from a school or wherever that is located in a priority population. So services are still benefiting priority populations, even though the site itself may not be in a priority population designated area. So if you are providing services, then you just need to describe that, and you can include the folks who are getting those services in your little census tracts being served by your population, by your project, and that would still be eligible. However, if your project is in an area that is not in a priority population and it's only serving folks from that area, then that would not qualify because no one from any priority population is receiving services or leading the project.
Okay, thank you. For that, should we include something like school zoning maps to support that, or just indicate the census tracts of community?
Yeah, just indicate the census tracts. That would be the best because all of the evaluators are using the same tools. So it's probably easiest in terms of just keeping it all even keel. But if you include other materials that you feel like really help explain something, please go ahead and upload them. That's fine. That it wouldn't be a bad thing, but it may not actually provide any additional support to your program either. So I'll leave that up to you. It's definitely not a requirement.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, the next person that I see is Christine Spencer.
I'm Christine from Coastal Roots Farm, and we're actually in an urban area. We're an urban farm located in Encinitas. It's kind of like the question that was just asked. So we, of course, are not in a low income area, but we donate like 85% of our food out to low income areas throughout San Diego County with offsite distributions. So it sounds like we're good with that. But I did notice with the census tract, there are a couple of our offsite distributions that are not labeled low income communities, but they're I can't remember the wording now. They're in like low income areas, but the people we're serving are just coming into the central distribution site, and they're all from low income communities. So I guess I'll just put low income communities for all of them. And then if you guys need more information, we'll just provide it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that works great. I think that really the whole point is just to make sure that, as you said, your program is serving either, again, led by or serving or located in a priority population. So if you're like, we're serving all these low income folks and you have an idea of where your clients are coming from, then just list those census tracts. That would be totally good.
Okay, and then there was also a couple that we actually do tribal reservations. So one of the census tracts said you can choose 3 tribal governments, but it's only 2 out of the 6 that we do. So should we put that as one of our census tracts, or should we leave it off because it's not all of our offsite distributions that we're?
Well, the census tract listing, I mean, you can focus on the groups that you work the most with, but you're good. In one of the questions on the application, it does ask you like what communities you serve, what's the community need. In the narrative portion, you can really go into depth about who you're serving. It doesn't, those census tracts is more of a way for evaluators to verify that that's actually happening. But the narrative portion, is going to be a much more robust and comprehensive way for you to tell your narrative about who's benefiting from your services. So don't feel like you can only talk about the census tracts that are listed because you can only provide 3. You
Right.
might have 30 census tracts
Yeah.
that you're providing services
Yeah.
to. So please go ahead and use that narrative portion to just talk about all of these different groups that you're working with.
Perfect. I have 2 more really quick questions.
Sure.
One is, can we ask for the entire 300,000 for salary or support, or should we, I know that 30% we can do indirect costs, but is there a balance we need to do farming supplies, things like that?
There's no guidance. There's nothing written into legislation or in the guidelines or anything telling you how to budget. You know, some people want to create workshops and that's what they want to do, you know, so do whatever. Your budget's just going to represent whatever it takes to get the job done, right? So
Right.
yeah, there's no restrictions on that outside of the land acquisition, 75% or less for land purchase or lease. But aside from that, no, there's no other guidance on budgets.
Perfect. Okay, one more quick question. So one of the things that we also do is what's called a pay what you can farm stand. And about 75% of people who come to our farm stand receive free produce, eggs, things like that. The only problem is it's located on our farm, which is not a low income community. Should we just leave that off?
No, you can still talk about that in your project, especially since you're working with demographics who I guess I shouldn't make any assumptions that folks who are getting free food are necessarily low income, but feel free to include that in the narrative that
Okay.
you're just, you know, when you're describing that. Again, it doesn't, if the population that's coming to receive the food qualifies as part of a priority population, then you can always just use that when you're working through your narrative about talking through where your services are going.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, I see the next hand, and I don't want to mispronounce your name, but Shamim or Shamim.
Hello, hi, yeah, this is Shamim. I'm from UC Davis. I don't know, like, I have a couple of questions, but let me know, like, if you don't have time to kind of answer because there are other people also waiting. The first things is like, I think you maybe have the idea that the UC Davis, basically they have the internal submission system, and each institute just allowing to submit one application per institute. And from that, basically, they allowed my application to submit only one application from UC Davis. My question is like, for this program, one thing is not clear to me, is that some things need to be physical activities, or it could be some, for example, like we will do the workforce development, some training workshop. Does that make kind of eligible, or it has to be kind of some physical or like the kind of in-person activities? In-person means like something have to grow for sure.
So for UCs, anyone who's in an institute of higher education, public or private, you guys are only eligible for track 1.
Yeah.
So I'm not totally sure, because the entire purpose of that is to redistribute funding as subawards. It's not to fund your own programming necessarily.
No, but in the program, it says like up to 60,000 you can.
Oh yeah, you can use 60,000 for whatever internal urban agriculture work you'd like to continue to invest in, and you would just be following the same guidelines essentially as a track 2 applicant. You know, essentially you can do anything, you can spend the money on the same list of eligible expenses that are in the RFA for track 2 and also for subawardees, which you'll see that whole list of eligible expenses in the RFA.
Yeah, just one follow-up question. Like, I know, like you said, like 60,000 we can use. Is there 60,000 beside the salary and everything, or that should be also including the salary and everything within that 60,000?
So for track 1, you can divert between 5,000 to 60,000 for any internal urban agriculture project that your organization is working on. And then if you're trying to ask whether or not you can divert funding from the main pool of money to hire or generate positions to manage the sub-award program, that is not a part of the 60,000. The
How about
funding
the
that
summer salary, like usually university, we take the summer salary for the PI.
the farmer salary, what?
Summer salary for the faculty?
Summer salary?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand
So is
your
that like
question.
every university, we have the 9 month salary and then we can take 3 months salary from the project as a faculty? So do you allow that kind of summer salary from that project?
You know what, Shamim, because your questions are so UC specific, do you mind if we set up a time outside of this to meet?
Sure.
Because I feel like I'm
Yeah,
not
that would be great.
understanding
I
the
don't
full
want to
scope
kind
of
of,
your questions. Yeah,
that will be great. I don't want to kind of waste the time for others.
okay, that would
I
be
will
great.
send
So,
you to-
oh, do you have my email address? I'll put my email address in the chat and then just email
Okay.
me and we'll figure out what all the UCCE questions that you have.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. All right, there's my oh wait, oops. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. I have some people in the waiting room. I just want to make sure I let everybody in. How do I do that? Okay. This is why it's good to have people helping you. All right. Okay, so the next hand that I see up right now is Sasha.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
So thank you so much for this session. I'm excited about the grant too. I have a couple questions. In the work plan, do
Mhm.
you need, and you kind of mentioned that the contract is going to be a lot more specific,
Mhm.
but in the work plan and the project activity, we are doing workshops. Do you want every single workshop and the date listed here?
Do you actually know the dates for? No, the question is,
Yeah.
the answer would be like, I can't imagine being a program person and figuring that out right now. No, but
Actually
you
did, because if you just do monthly and your second Saturday
Ah.
and you already have a education program, so
gotcha.
I,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, so actually in that case, yes, please. If you have repeated activities, like you do a farm stand every Friday or something the second Saturday of every month, even if it is repetitive, please do include that as a deliverable in your work plan.
Okay.
If it's weekly, there's no need to write it like a gajillion times. You would just write it like October, weekly, whatever the activity is. Yes, but that would be great because at the end of the day, a huge part of the work plan is really meant to reflect the budget.
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then I had another question about in the application, the SWOT, do you want that as bullet points or as paragraphs?
I don't have a preference. You can write it. There's no guidance on how that needs to look. If it's neither one is better or worse, I could see how bullet points would make it easier to follow if that's the way your brain works, but I can't really say that there's a better way. Just kind of whatever works for your brain is fine. And just keeping in mind that there's just, these are external evaluators who know nothing about you.
Sure.
So the more specific you can be about what's going on, the better. And bullet points are completely okay as long as you're being descriptive enough that someone can understand what you're talking about.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, the next hand I see is Danny.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
I have a question. So for the internal urban agriculture projects, do we have to describe what we plan to do with that, or could we keep it as broad as we want to?
And are you talking for track 1?
This is for track 1, yes. Let's say that we want to use those funds to plan for a project. Is that allowable or no?
So it should be for the same list of eligible expenses that you see that you would use for your subawards. So I can't remember what page on the RFA it is, but there's that list. Actually, let me look at it really quick because I want to make sure. If you're looking, have you looked at the RFA, Danny, at all? I mean, of course, I'm guessing you have at this point.
I have, yes. I think my
okay.
question was more so, do we need to have like a very thought out plan as to how we like what we plan to use with that expense, or could we keep it pretty broad, like that we want to do like we want to do a certain allowable activity?
I mean, you have to be able to line item something in the budget, and then you have to also show in your work plan what measurable outcomes this funding is going to have. So you will want to be some, I mean, it doesn't have to be something that is like totally nailed down and completely 100% clear, but I would say that the more clear you can be, the more likely an evaluator will be able to understand the value of your work, you know? So as long as you're abiding by the eligible expenses that are listed in the RFA, and you can see a list of that starting on page 14, where it says direct costs. Just look at that list, keep that in mind, and make sure that that something that you're about to describe is at least related to one of these categories: equipment, infrastructure, technical assistance, operations, workforce development, community engagement, and education. I mean, they're very broad and there's a ton of stuff that can happen there. But it would need to fall into one of those categories.
Sounds good. I have two more short questions, if that's fine.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
My next question is, let's say that I know that grant administration is for indirect, right? But would you consider the managing of the subawards as grant administration as well, or would that be allowable for direct funds?
So yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of the direct funds can be used for the staff time that is needed to create the subaward program, to do the outreach for the subaward program, to start enrolling people in the subaward program, and then to administer the subaward program. So all of those can be included as part of your direct costs. Your indirect costs would include things like other administrative tasks that aren't directly related to management of subawards, or administrative, or like your rent and utilities that are associated with your office or whatever infrastructure you have. There is a reference to what the indirect costs are also in the RFA, and those are on page 13 of the request for applications. When you look at point number 7 under allowable costs, you'll see what the indirects are. So yeah, did that answer your question?
It did. So would like our accountant, for example, our bookkeeper, be able to come out of direct funds if they will also be managing those subawards, or is that a little bit more tricky?
I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, just because they're not like directly interacting with any of the subawardees, which I understand that there is a heavy cost, but we've been I mean, the indirect cost rate is 30%, so you should be able to cover the costs that way. Generally speaking, the intent behind the direct costs were that you would be able to cover the cost of the staff that is needed to engage with the community, to enroll people in the subaward, develop the application process, do all of the outreach, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I would try to keep your and you're going to have to justify your indirect costs. You can't just claim 30% and not explain what it's for. So yeah, I would just leave that up to your discretion.
Sounds good. And my final question is for the community collaboration matrix. Are we able to include farmers in that? In terms of like farmers that we have worked with? Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody who's been who you've developed a trusted community relationship with, that you've kind of created, yeah, absolutely. Farmers are completely allowable as a letter of support for your community collaborations matrix. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Danny. Okay, next up, Mary.
Okay, that's better. I've unmuted. My question, I've never done a grant application before. So it's regarding whether there's any tax implication if one is awarded these funds. And I know it will depend on the legal entity that receives the funding.
Mhm.
But is there anything that's automatic that makes it like a non-taxable?
I'm not gonna lie, I don't know the answer to that. The way I've asked this to the grants administration's office about subawards, you know, because I didn't want people to receive subawards and then lose their public benefit somehow because they got a $60,000 influx of funding. And so what we've done is in the RFA, you'll see that there is funding that you can set aside to hire an accountant as a
Okay.
consultant to your individual issue. Because everyone's financing issues are different, your incomes are all different, the way that, you know,
Right.
so there, you can set aside funding in your budget to consult with an accountant as needed. Yeah, I did not want to have some negative implications down the line where someone loses their social security or their, you know, their food stamps or something like that because they get this one-time influx for a project. So that would be my recommendation is to
Okay,
include an accountant in your
okay,
budget.
sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, Mary. Patrick, Family Farms?
Yes, hi, and thank you, Sarah. My name is Gwen Patrick. My question is kind of two-part. You answered it, I think, a little bit. We have land and want to put a mobile classroom. We already have one classroom, but want to put a mobile classroom on, which would include, permits, local permits, and everything, installation and all that. Will the grant cover that?
Yeah, I mean, the grant can absolutely cover infrastructure costs. It can cover the cost for you to hire a consultant to design it or whatever you need. All of those things would be eligible under the category. If you look back at the request for applications, you'll go back to that list that I was mentioning earlier, which starts on page 14. And I believe that based on what you're saying, you would fall under community engagement and education. So yeah, that would be fine.
Wow, okay, great. My other question is, if we had, let's see, a need for now equipment, and I was looking, I didn't see it in there, tractor and related for expansion of, we're working with kids, but then also, hands-on farming and all that. But would an actual tractor be able to be put in the budget?
Oh, yes, big time. That's a piece of equipment. So anything over the cost of $5,000 is categorized in the equipment section. But absolutely, I mean, the whole grant could be for equipment and then, you spend it all in the first 6 months because you're just buying what you need and then you're done, But yes, absolutely, that would be totally fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, next in line, I have Lydia. Hey, Lydia, your sound is... Lydia, I'm sorry, for some reason, you are not, for some reason, you're, can't understand you. I'm sorry, Lydia. Okay, I'm sorry, maybe come back to you in a bit. Okay, let's get that solved. Sorry, Lydia. Okay, all right, I'll move on for now. Okay, great. Sorry, Lydia. Maybe you can call me or send me an email if you're having issues. Okay, the next person I see is Saul.
Hi, yes, it's Saul.
Saul, sorry about that.
I've never heard anything like that on Zoom.
I know, right? Me neither.
Mine might be a simple question because I know I've seen it in the FAQ and the previous recordings. Yeah, so we have sole proprietorship. We don't have tax forms for 2022, right? So that's disqualified. Is there any way to use other tax forms if we have similar farms?
Yeah.
We just got this new one this year, but we've been doing essentially the same work. It would be the same exact work, same exact sort of size, can we use other tax forms for other farms?
Okay, so Saul, that is such a good question. So the answer to your question is there are a lot of organizations or of projects that were informal for 5 years. They were doing a CSA or doing whatever they do, right? But they weren't like a formalized thing. What I've been doing is I've been working on a case by case basis with people who don't have the 2022 tax forms. Send me a list in an email of what you could provide, and then I'll send that to the grants administration's office and say, like, would these work? I've had other people submit, like, we have QuickBooks invoices from stuff from 2022, or we have receipts of things, you know, whatever you have. Let me know what you have, and I do want to work with people on that because I farmed that way for years until I, you know, figure it out. So yes, please, let's work on a case-by-case basis with that. If you have other supporting documentation, just send me a list and an email of what you have.
Okay, perfect. I'll email you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Saul. Okay, next up, I see Grimm Family Education.
Hi there, this is Dylan Wilson. So I've got 2 questions and then kind of a sub question on that. So the first one is, if we're applying with a school district in track 1, are we able to apply for multiple schools within that district? But more importantly, if there are other nonprofits working within that district also applying, could that affect every single person that's applying within that district?
Okay, so first, I guess my first clarifying question is, is the school districts are not eligible for this grant opportunity?
Got it.
So because CDFA has a program called Farm to School that has like 5 times more money than this program does. So we're redirecting school districts to apply through Farm to School.
So 0 school districts whatsoever?
No, school districts are not eligible to apply.
Only higher ed?
Higher ed is eligible only for track 1, which is the function of track 1 is to redistribute funds throughout the community.
Okay.
As sub awards.
That answers all of our questions. I guess we were a little bit misinformed, so sorry if we wasted anybody's time, but thank you for the clarification.
If it's not, one thing I would like to clarify in case this helps at all is that, for example, there are a lot of nonprofits or even small businesses that work with schools, right? That nonprofit or small business or whatever the formulation is totally eligible to work on projects that happen on school district property, that work with kids, whatever. It's just that school districts themselves are not an eligible applicant.
Okay, so then another question to that. Do you know if private nonprofits are excluded from that application process?
I actually don't even know what do you mean by a private nonprofit?
So it's basically funded by one main philanthropist or donor, has different reporting requirements than a public nonprofit. I can maybe just shoot you an email to clarify that.
Yeah.
I'll do that. I'll just shoot you an email, but thank you all for your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Send me any questions that you need and I can send them to the grants administration's office to make sure that they're eligible entities. So
okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay. Have a great one all.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay. Next up, I see Elena.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you.
Hi.
Questions mostly on budget. So we are track 1. You know, we work already with a lot of urban ag projects in the county, and we're looking to expand our reach, you know, so we kind of look in multiple tiers, you know, like tier 1 is the projects we've created or helped create. Tier 2 is someone else is doing it, but they need that support and that pass-through entity. And tier 3 really open it up because we really don't know the level of, you know, innovation, right, and effort in the community that far. So it's a great opportunity. What stopped us a little bit is this a restriction on what you call work done internally.
Oh, yeah, right? Okay.
Because the gardens that we created and we hold, right, they're not us. But like we are not giving them cash either, right? What we've learned that a lot of these small projects don't actually have capacity to receive cash. Well, like writing them $5,000 check wouldn't help, but us buying, like supplies, paying contractors directly, like working kind of like hand holding. So we don't fit in this, like what you envision, give them cash and forget about them sort of thing, right? How do we go around?
Elena, that is such a great question. And so I'm so glad that you asked that. So if you're a track 1 applicant and your goal is to, help people get what they need, whether that's materials, technical assistance, training, whatever, but that they aren't in a position to receive the funding. However, they're going to be accomplishing a project that's not under your direct management, right? That sounds like what you're sort of describing.
Exactly.
Please know that a track 1 organization can absolutely purchase on behalf, hire on behalf, do whatever on behalf of a sub-awardee. When you look at you're going to see the sub-awardee guidelines, and it has that table 1 that you need to fill out.
Yeah.
You'll still fill that out with the name of the people who are the beneficiaries of it, all of the information about what the project is accomplishing. You'll attach the invoices, even though your organization paid for them, you will still just attach those invoices, and that is a sub-award. So that is A-okay.
But then could we, but then like for some of them, 5,000 is too much. We'd rather.
Oh, wow, interesting.
We would rather spread the love, like we already have 14 projects.
That's super interesting, Elena. I need to ask somebody whether or not you can spend, like, why wouldn't you be allowed to spend less than 5,000? I want to say the point is to meet a community need. So if the community only needs $500 of irrigation supplies, then that's what they need, right? So, yeah, okay. Would you mind, Elena, of possibly putting that in the chat so that I can add that to my things that I need to follow up on?
I could send you email directly.
Sure, yeah.
Yes, let me do this. We would, love the clarification, and also then how to describe it in the budget, right? Because your budget form is so simple. And I heard you mention, and like we would have to describe like overhead. I mean, we're only going to take 10% because most of our is direct, right? But how much information do you want in the budget? How detailed do you want?
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So in the budget for track 1, there's a category that just does sub-awards.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't expect, honestly, when this was designed, we did not expect people to know who they're going to give money to. A huge part of this was making an announcement to the public to let folks know that you have funding. So essentially, whatever amount you feel like your organization has the capacity to manage and delve out, you're just going to put that line item in the sub-award funding pool. It's that simple. It's almost like too simple. It's almost confusingly simple, but you're really just going to put down how much of the funding you want to dedicate to redistributing as sub-awards. And then once the funding, and then let's say your project is approved, you'll just start to invoice for sub-awards as they come through. So did that help answer your question?
Wow.
Absolutely, yes. And I'll follow up. And one more smaller question is the priority population, right? We work with a lot of areas that are in the priority map. Some of our projects, the project itself might not be in the map, but they are serving the population. That is like, how do we communicate that to you?
Yeah, so essentially you're just going to use the narrative box to describe the projects that you're going to want to fund, and then you can discuss the priority populations being served, even though the farm is not in that location. So again, as long as your project is serving priority populations, it's an eligible cost. So if you have any other snags there, let me know. But the narrative section of it's asking you what your community served is and what your community need is, that's really where you're going to go into discussing all of these different folks that you're serving throughout your county and beyond potentially, it sounds like. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Elena. Steve.
Hi, seems like the questions just get harder each week, but hopefully I have some easy ones. For track one, I see a lot about technical assistance and also about the track one folks convening with each other and you. I just want to make sure, well, first that we can also do training and workshops and okay, great. And we're also planning to do like a longer training. It might even be a kind of a summit for our partners, and it could even include be 2 days. So in that case, can we budget for travel and lodging for folks?
Yes. So it's hard to like answer that in full without fully knowing the scope of your project. And also, but in terms of allowable expenses, technical assistance can either be technical assistance that you hire, like you want an irrigation specialist to come out, or it can be technical assistance that you are planning on providing and you need to cover the staff time to pay for folks to provide that technical assistance. With regards to like a formalized conference, I'm assuming, Steve, you're talking about track one, right?
Yes. So we're going to be working with a good number of sub-awardees and others that are like kind of sharing best practices about urban ag at these faith sites.
Okay, so for that aspect of things, for budgetary asks that are not the sub-award funding money that you're handing out, and they're also not for indirect costs, and they're not for staff that's needed to activate the sub-award, you have just that $5,000 to $60,000 range to spend on your own internalized project work, which would be this conference, it sounds like, which is not done for a conference, but you know, so.
Okay, but training's definitely okay. And
training is
then,
good.
Is there a guideline for a minimum percentage of the awards that track one should be re-granting? We know it's 2 awards or more, but.
I mean, that was like such a baseline minimum. We're hoping for many, many, many more than 2.
Right, we're gonna do more.
Yeah. So I don't know what your full ask is. You know, the range is from 400 or 200,000 to 800,000. So I can't like tell you how many sub awards we expect.
But there's not a guideline of like, if you go for 750,000, at least 300 should be going sub awards, or at least 400, or at least 500 or 600.
There's nothing written into guidelines, but you know, obviously the intent is to get as much money out to the community as possible. So, but no, there's nothing in the guidelines that dictates what that percentage needs to be. We just wanted to make sure that you had the funding, that organizations have the funding to cover the staff that's going to be needed to create and launch a sub-award program, because that is, you're creating a new program. That's a big deal. Outside of the funding that would be necessary to do that, and outside of that 5,000 to 60,000 for your own urban ag project, everything else should be going to your sub-awards. Yeah.
Okay. And this will be, I know other people have questions too. So this is one on the RFA on page, what do we got? Well, the scoring piece about community collaboration, there's different points based on how many letters from underserved communities. So I just want to be clear that in that case, underserved communities could be either low income or socially disadvantaged or both. Because we have some that are.
Are you talking about the community collaborations matrix?
Yes.
The letters do not have to come. Well, let me just double check that before I say that. The letters just need to come from, let's see. So organizations and communities that play an important role. Yeah. In your relationship to serve underserved communities. Yeah. So, I mean, the community could be anything, could be any name or person.
But it could be, does it kind of count as one of those underserved communities if they're low income, but they're not socially disadvantaged, or do they, because, you know, we have kind of 3 terms going around here. One's underserved, one's socially disadvantaged, one's
priority populations.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure that either low income or socially disadvantaged are both considered underserved for the points here.
Yes. Right? Yes. Yeah. So, yep. You can actually look at the definitions. You know what? The the climate map, it doesn't have a very good access to definitions. There are definitions in the RFA. If you look at that, in the very beginning section, there's a whole section that's just definitions, and you'll see underserved, socially disadvantaged. So any of those groups.
Okay, and on that matrix, we could add another column or two if we wanted to share different things about partners. Yes.
Oh, columns to share different information.
In additional information on that matrix, you give a template. Can we add other kinds of things on the matrix, or do you need it to be exactly just the form you have?
I mean, you can add more sections if you have more letters, but I think that changing the whole form is not a.
Adding a column is a bad idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
probably.
you.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Steve.
That's helpful all the way around. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I see the next one is Karen or Karine or Karen. Sorry, I'm not sure.
No worries. Karen Rue. So my question is track 2 regarding land acquisition. Are those subject to appraisal? Like, are they limited to an appraised value, or can they pay open market rate?
I'm sorry, I don't know the difference between open market and appraised value.
So, well, do they have to get an appraisal of the property before they purchase it?
Yeah, you would need to be in contract because I mean, anyone who's going to purchase property, unless there's some extenuating circumstances, is going to need to go through a second party financial institution, usually to like get a mortgage on the piece of land. Are you talking about buying land out?
No,
outright?
I'm talking about an appraisal in the sense that that's going to look at what other properties of similar characteristics might have sold for in recent times, as opposed to the open market where they're subject to whatever the seller is requiring. That could be above what what would be like an average amount.
CDFA.
So like if they encounter a seller that's driving a hard bargain, and they end up, demanding an exorbitant price.
Yeah, can you send me that question written, because I think I'm having a hard time. All I can tell you is, as I said before, you can spend 75% of your budget towards land acquisition, and in order to even have the possibility of processing a payment, you would need to be in contract already.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
I don't, in terms of like an appraisal, there hasn't been any language that I've seen anywhere about needing like some sort of market research document. But I mean, if it's a 1/5 of an acre vacant lot in Fresno and you want $6 million, like that would need to be justified. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Okay, great. And then
and then one thing to note also is that you cannot buy property that has a house on it.
Okay, yep, that's fair. And could these funds be used if they can't find a plot of land to purchase? Can these be used to cover rental fees, land rental fees?
Leasing is totally a-okay. So once you get your lease agreement, you can submit for reimbursement, or you would have to work with the finance department to submit an advance payment request, but you would still need a signed lease.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen. Okay, Patrick Family Farms.
Oh, okay. Thank you. One more question. If our subawardee is based in another state, I mean, they're only 2 hours away, but they're still based in a state outside of California. Is that okay?
No.
You're saying no?
Yeah, no, state funding needs to serve the state of California. Yeah.
Okay, so it wouldn't, okay.
No,
Understood.
yeah, you wouldn't be able to fund things out of state. Sorry. Okay. Great. Wow, you guys are amazing. It's 4:59. There's one more minute if anyone has any lingering questions. We're going to be doing these office hours every Thursday at this time. So the application is due on the 23rd. So we have 2 more of these, the 12th and the 19th. Those will be the last 2 office hours. So please don't hesitate to reach out, send me an email. You can call me, whatever you need. And please attend these office hours if they're helpful to you. So I just appreciate everyone's time and thank you so much for joining. Have a good night, everybody.